So the new Elden Ring DLC Shadow of the Erdtree just dropped and it is amazing. It added a huge brand new area with more places to explore and hidden secrets to discover, a bunch of really cool weapons and armor sets that completely changed the way you play the game, and of course they added more of what people mainly play Souls-likes for, the difficult bosses. With everything checked off the list of features people want for this expansion, it should be getting universal praise from everybody just like the base game did, right? Well, not exactly, because quite a bit of people are actually unhappy with Shadow of the Erdtree. In fact, they were so upset that they review bombed it on Steam, leaving the DLC with a mixed rating despite it getting universal praise everywhere else. Why? Because it's way too hard. And because there are a lot of performance issues, which fair enough, but the main reason is that the difficulty is too much for even the hardcore Souls-like fanbase. And I think this brings back the age-old question, are Souls games too hard? But Souls-likes were intended to be hard. That was Miyazaki's original vision for the franchise. And sure, that would alienate a large chunk of people who are interested in getting to the Souls games, but it also creates a more satisfying gameplay loop because it feels so much more euphoric when you finally take down a really difficult boss. Hardcore Souls fans prided themselves on having to actually get good in order to beat the game. The devs wanted the players to have that sense of pride and accomplishment when you overcome tough obstacles, even at the expense of a broader audience. That's why these games have been so unapologetically difficult for the past decade now. So making the game easier would tarnish, get it? Cause Elden Ring and tarnish? Okay, I'll stop now.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
It'll tarnish Miyazaki's artistic vision of the series, which is what the fans wanted in the first place, wasn't it? Of course, since this is the expansion to the base game of Elden Ring, it's gonna need to ramp up the difficulty in order to make the price point worth it. So it's kinda odd that those very same fans are saying that it's finally too difficult for them, despite the same complaint being brought up many years ago. But to be fair, I can see where the complaints are coming from after playing the DLC myself. The bosses here are significantly more difficult than the ones in the base game, but that's to be expected since this is the expansion to Elden Ring's endgame after all. The DLC does, however, give you all the tools to deal with the scaling difficulty through the various new weapon arts, equipment, and Erdtree leveling system, which you're pretty much required to level if you want to stand a chance against these new bosses. What I find really amusing about this whole ordeal is that these were the exact same complaints that were levied at Dark Souls when it first came out, because that was the first time the Souls series ever got mainstream attention, bringing in a whole slew of brand new players who have no idea about the reputation that preceded it, only to unknowingly jump into it, getting brutally curb stomped into oblivion by every enemy in the game. They would then immediately write a scathing review about how much they hated the experience of a Souls-like. Many of these new players jumped into the Souls series thinking that it would be just a fun little experience that wouldn't try to screw you over at every turn. But boy, were they in for a rude awakening. The same thing even happened with Elden Ring when it first came out because it attracted such a huge mainstream audience that never played Souls-likes before. Now fast forward a year later to the release of the expansion and we have the same song and dance once again. It's the endless cycle that's bound to always happen to Souls games, and as long as new players get introduced to this franchise, there will always be that loud minority of people who will voice these frustrations. So what's the difference between people complaining the first time and now? Well, according to some of the Steam reviews, the bosses this time around are a lot more aggressive in their attacks, leaving very little room for an opening, and their combo strings are way too long to the point where it feels like they just never stop attacking. It also doesn't help that pretty much every enemy in the new area is killing you in 2 hits. And I can see where the frustration comes from because it feels really shitty to be dodging really long combo strings only to make one mistake and lose half your HP for it. Not only that, but some people were quite upset that you're pretty much required to level up your Erdtree blessing when you want a decent fighting chance against the new enemies because it significantly increases your damage and damage reduction within the DLC areas, pretty much forcing you to explore the map and look for each one of the fragments. While I do agree that the enemy AI feels like it was adjusted to be more relentless and have less openings for counterattacks, I would say that the difficulty is manageable, coming from someone who's absolutely horrible at Souls-likes. It's not like the bosses are so hard that we can't do anything about it, Because the reality is that these bosses were designed around players using spirit summons in order to draw aggro away from themselves in order to give a little breathing room. We know this because the expansion introduced a whole nother dedicated upgrade system just for your spirit ashes. It was also balanced around players having extremely overpowered builds that were just one-shotting bosses in the base game. So FromSoft simply just adjusted accordingly to what the player base were doing and made the enemies scale much harder. But I do see how so many people were upset because a lot of players like to play the game solo without any summons at all. The only way that's really quote unquote acceptable by the community, and that's basically like playing Elden Ring on hard mode, especially in the Shadows of the Erdtree expansion, where the bosses will instantly charge at you the moment you step in the arena and will relentlessly attack you with really long combo strings that have a huge aerial effects attached to them. As a solo player, these fights are extremely difficult because you have to be focused the instant you enter the boss fight. They do not give you any breathing room whatsoever. Not to mention that if your Erdtree blessing level is low, you're just gonna get punished even harder with the bosses pretty much one-shotting you as soon as you step up to them. Some people might not want to hear this, but the developers intended for you to use your spirit ashes and to explore each and every corner of the map to find every Erdtree fragment before even attempting the boss fights. Even Miyazaki himself says that he uses summons when he plays the game. If the mastermind himself uses summons, then why can't you? They're in Elden Ring for a reason, because they're another tool for you to use, just like weapons, spells, and ashes of war. Sure, it makes the game easier and someone would probably call you a filthy casual, but so does having a broken build that one-shots everything or is able to tank every hit. There are so many tools and options that were added in Shadows of the Erdtree expansion that you don't have to be limited to just one playstyle. The DLC is only going to be difficult if you choose to make it difficult by not using the tools given to you, because there are plenty of people out there who have beaten it already with relative ease.
Boss enemies, don't care. Hold L1. Just mashing my controller. There's literally nothing to it.
The biggest thing about this whole difficulty outrage though is that it overshadows and minimizes the actual criticisms about the DLC. The ones that people should actually be complaining about, like the performance issues or the enemy design or the map design, stuff that should actually be criticized. Because in all honesty, the difficulty isn't as bad as the small minority of people are making it out to be. Yes, the enemies are harder, but that's to be expected for an expansion. The devs intended for you to explore the map, upgrade your character, and change your build before attempting to defeat one of the bosses. And even then, they'll still be fairly challenging because that's just the nature of this genre. But it's not something that's beyond our ability to overcome. It just takes some adaptation and perseverance to make it through, like any other Souls game. But that's just me. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Let me know down below and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content in the future. See ya.